name is Leslie Graff and I am an artist here in Sutton, Massachusetts. So I thought I would take a few minutes and talk to you about some of my work. Being an artist is seriously the most fun job I think you could ever have. But my background is actually in marriage, family, and human development. That was what I studied in graduate school. And so it really influences the way that I work. So I thought today I'd share with you a little bit from one of my series. I get to show work in galleries and museums around the country. And I also teach at the Danforth Art Museum at the Art Center in Framingham, Massachusetts. So I love helping other people discover the joy that can be had from creating art as well. So the pieces I'm going to talk with you about today are from my dessert series. Now, this is a really fun series because I love to bake. And so the way that these paintings come about, I actually make the dessert that I'm going to use, and then I do a photo shoot of it, and then I paint from those reference images. So you can imagine that my kids love it when I'm doing dessert pieces, because not only do we get to make the cake, but we also get to eat the cake. So the first piece I'm going to talk about over here is a piece entitled How It Looked in the Reflection. And you'll notice that this piece is a painting of a cake, and then there's a piece of the cake, and then you can kind of see over here in the cake tender, the vintage cake tender, a reflection of part of the piece of cake. And I really like this piece because the reflection is only showing part of this piece, and even then it's distorted. And so it really speaks to how we see ourselves and how often we see things with a limited perspective or with a distorted perspective. So instead of seeing a whole person, we're only seeing this little distorted piece, or even the way that we see ourselves or body image, how we view ourselves, is this distortion of the actual reality. Now, I love to use mid-century pieces, especially kitchenware in these paintings. So you'll notice my favorite cake tenders from the 1950s and 60s show up a lot in these. So the second piece I have here is titled You Want a Piece of Me. So this piece is actually about how we use our time. So just like a cake, I could cut it into lots of tiny pieces or a few big pieces, but there's still only a finite amount of cake. It's kind of like my days, right? There's 24 hours in a day, and I have to be really deliberate about how I apportion that time, because lots of things want a piece of my time. And as a mother of 3 sons, as someone who kind of works in a number of fields, it's really important and imperative for me to maintain that balance in my life. So thinking through that. Another really cool thing about this piece is the pattern that's behind it was actually a pattern that was inspired by wrapping paper that my grandparents had in their fabric store in Idaho back in the 1950s. So it's sort of a fun connection family-wise to be able to tie that into the piece. Then the next piece I'm going to talk about over here is titled Glass Ceiling. So this sort of speaks about the changes and opportunities for women. And I love how the cake tender just sort of perfectly is a glass ceiling. Like when I thought about it, I was like, oh, this is the perfect analogy for this. So I love to talk about sort of emotional, social, psychosocial themes through my work. Now this piece, I have to tell you, when I drew it, I thought this is going to be awesome. And then I realized what I was going to have to do in the top ball part of the cake tender, because it's a ball and there was this crazy polka dot pattern. It gets distorted like a fisheye distortion, and it's inverted. And so painting all those tiny little dots in the top of the cake tender almost made me crazy. And then the last piece down at the end is one of my pieces called It Seemed So Black and White. And this piece, it's a checkerboard cake, but it's really how a lot of times we see the world. That people tend to think things are so clear cut and it's this or it's that, but it's really not. There's a lot more nuance to life. There's a lot more explanation. There's a lot more understanding we need to have. So I really like these pieces. And the fun thing is when I've done shows with these pieces, like when I did it at the Newport Art Museum, I actually made the cakes for an opening, and people got to try the cakes that went with the paintings. So it's been a really fun series to work on. I hope you enjoyed seeing them today.